Friday, May 25th, 2018, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. It's almost 9 a.m. London, a little later than usual, but still fairly early. We'll be looking at the markets and just talking about a few things here and there. One of them is the Petro Yuan, an interesting article by Tom Luongo on Zero Hedge has been published on Zero Hedge. It says Petro Yuan is only the beginning. Pop goes the metals market. And I also want to talk about a German series that I watched on Netflix called The Same Sky. And it's about 1970s Berlin, when Berlin was divided by, East Berlin and West Berlin. Really interesting. It made me think about YouTube, and I'll tell you later. Let's see what we're doing in the markets. Of course, yesterday, gold and silver did very well. Gold traded back above 1300, broke through 1302, which on the way down recently, it's been a key support because in the last few months, the lows have been around that 1302 level. We went down to almost 1380 recently, and so gold had a very good day, not only in dollars but also in other currencies. They're still doing very well. This morning we are at 1303, so down about $1. I think the high right now it's been 1306, and yesterday as well was around 1306. So it's looking good, but we never know with gold. They might try to get it to close below 1300 for the week. I know in the US it's going to be a long weekend, Memorial Weekend. So I think I'm not sure if the markets are going to be. I think they'll be open normally today, but on Monday it might be a bit quieter, but the gold market keeps going anyway because it's more of a global market. Silver 1662, down 3. Range has been 1656, 1670. I did notice yesterday though that when gold was really picking up, silver, I expected silver to do even better. Gold was up 1%. And I thought, silver should be at least up 2, but it wasn't. So I think they did cap silver to some extent, and only because they couldn't let gold go up so much. That's how it works. I've been in the market for too long not to notice those things. The gold-silver ratio is at 78:40. The key level really looks to be just below 77, 75 right now. So the chart looks like it's pointing further down for that ratio, which would be positive for precious metals. Stock markets yesterday had early on they were down quite a bit. The Dow was down over 1% early on in the day, but of course, probably management by the powers that be got the market back up, and it only finished down 1/3% or 75 points, which is, years ago it would have been a big move down, but nowadays it's just like 0.3%. S&P was down 0.2, and the NASDAQ was basically unchanged. This morning the Dow futures is up 34, 24,838. S&P is up 2 3/4 points at 2730. So very little activity. NASDAQ 100 future up 1/4%. Currency wise, the pound is down today 1/4%, 133.50. The euro is down as well, 116.93, down about 1/4. So gold is holding relatively well. And the dollar is up slightly against the yen, 109.38, up 0.1%. Crude oil has continued to come off here a little bit. It's 70.23, down another 50 cents. But I think the trend's still higher for crude oil. We've seen a backup in yields. Does this mean that the danger for the U.S. economy is over? and that yields are going to go back down. You know, mortgage rates will come back down and keep the credit boom going. No, I don't think so. This is just a correction. I think if you go back to July 2016, and I was doing videos back then about whether we've seen a bottom in yields. And I didn't say we had seen, I have to admit, I said, but we did, because we went down to 135 and we're now at almost 3%. So I think the damage is already being done. And the other thing that I think is happening is that the markets, and I saw an article, someone noting that the Fed, you know, the market is trying to play the, you know, call the bluff on the Fed and Jamie Dimon, who controls, who's probably, JP Morgan and the Fed are intertwined, of course. Jamie Dimon saying that rates going up means the economy is doing great. And I think, yeah, so the markets are saying, yeah, so let's take yields up, Jamie Dimon and the Fed, and see how great the economy is doing. So that's really an interesting point there. Let me see if I find, give the person credit, because I just saw it on, I think it was on Zero Hedge. Where is it? Or maybe it was somewhere else. Let's have a look. But I kind of agree with whoever said that, you know, about, you know, interest rates and maybe the market's calling the Fed's bluff. Anyway, what did I want to talk about? Yeah, this other article, I've covered the PetroYuan, the new oil contract in Shanghai at the International Energy Exchange extensively. Actually, I did not realize that the LME, which is the London Metals Exchange, had been bought by the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing, HKEX. I remember dealing on that exchange. Used to do Hang Seng futures. Index. A lot of my European clients had exposure to the Hang Seng and to Hong Kong stocks, and I used to call Hong Kong, trade the futures. Really good exchange. The Hang Seng index was traded on that exchange, and the London Metals Exchange. Don't confuse it with the LBMA. The London Metals Exchange is more of a base metals exchange. They trade tin, copper, zinc, those kind of industrial metals. They have, I think, added a gold contract, the LME, but the major gold exchange in London or market is the LBMA for physical. But the LME now as well in Hong Kong is trading gold. And it's also priced in yuan. But now they're saying that they're going to price all the other industrial metals in yuan. And so Tom Luongo says PetroYuan is only the beginning. Pop goes the metals market. So he's basically saying how the United States, with its policies of capital, sanctions, banning people from using SWIFT, is basically pushing the rest of the world. Even the EU now with the Iran deal, even countries like Turkey, there is quickly making people move towards other ways of doing business. And he says this is going to be could be just as big as the PetroYuan, which has captured over 10% of the crude market in about 2 months. So, and Tom Luongo notes that even though the LME was bought in 2012, it is now becoming really important. And I go to the end of his article. He says the critical shift. And I quote, he says, the reason why the PetroYuan contract was so immediately successful is because China provided traders with a direct path to convertibility into gold. It did risk listing because profits wouldn't be trapped behind China's capital controls. And it goes on to say this convertibility wouldn't be worth anything if China didn't have a steady source of gold streaming via the LME in Hong Kong. But I would also add that foreigners can also deal in the Shanghai Futures Exchange, physical gold there as well, not just Hong Kong. And it says China is the world's largest oil importer, with Trump's threats to cut everyone off from dollar funding markets over Iran making the switch. Sans risk, without real risk, from dollars to yuan was an easy choice to make. Now let's bring Europe, Russia, and the rest of the world into the realm to coordinate the attacks on the US's dominance of global financial markets. And I continue, he says, the chaos unleashed by the confluence of Italy's new coalition, a strengthening dollar, and trade wars is putting insane pressure on these emerging markets, vulnerable to a dollar shock. Yeah, when the dollar goes up against these currencies, the corporate debts for that country, which are usually in dollar, go up, and they have difficulty funding it. It says Turkey's lira and debt are under extreme pressure while President Erdogan defies NATO and U.S. foreign policy over Syria, Israel, and Iran. So basically he's saying that this is driving people more and more into another option than why would you want to deal in dollars if the U.S. is going to punish you for anything you do that they don't agree with. So really interesting article. I'll put it in the link below in the description if you want to read it, by Tom Longo. Oh yeah, and now to finish off, I'm going to talk about this. It's on Netflix. I watched some of it yesterday. It's called The Same Sky. It's a German television program, and basically is set in 1974. And it's a spy thriller, kind of thriller, taking place in East and West Berlin. And there's a lot of scenes in East Berlin, and you can see how they used to live in the old German Democratic Republic, and in West Berlin, of course, which was under occupation as well. You had the British section, you had the US section and all that, all the spying. But it was interesting that in one of the apartment blocks, the main characters lived in East Berlin. One of the main characters was this middle-aged guy who was a factory foreman, but he was also a member of the Communist Party. And he used to go around checking and snooping on everyone in the building. He used to carry a binocular to spy on people. It's amazing. And in one scene, he goes up to this apartment, and they used to have the names of the people on the door. He knocked on the door, Mrs. Schmidt, I forgot her name, but anyway, and she said, your son, and he was, he said, your son's been watching, has he been watching Western cartoons? I saw your antenna is pointing towards the west, your TV antenna. I've looked at it. And she said, oh, it must have been the wind that blew the antenna. And it reminded me of YouTube. But why? Well, because YouTube is like trying to get people to turn towards mainstream again. And they're censoring, their algorithms are screwing around with really popular alternative channels. And yeah, it's much more subtle. It's not like a guy with binoculars looking, at the roof of the building and looking to see what the little boy is watching on TV and then knocking on the door. But it's the same concept. It's much more technologically advanced. So what happened to East Germany? I mean, 1974, 15 years later, the whole thing collapsed. It's interesting. I recommend people watching this because there are a few characters trying to get out of East Berlin, and they feel quite lonely. They feel quite helpless that nothing will ever improve. And I know it took another 15 years for this unsustainable socialist system of oppressive system to collapse. And I think we're going through the same process now, even though we're supposed to live in a free world, the Western free world. But I'm afraid we're much more like East Germany was. I know we have a lot of the material wealth that they didn't have then, but that's just a veneer helped by huge credit and debt. So yeah, I'll finish off with that. And I want to say as well that today I will be doing a live stream at 9 p.m. London time, which will be 5 p.m. New York or Eastern Daylight Time, summertime. And I'm going to be talking about the central banks because I think it's really important to wake people up, to make people aware that central banks are actually flawed institutions. They do not need to be around. And I'm going to talk about a lot of the fallacies that people have about central banks, that they know everything. And of course, I'll take your questions as well. So yeah, live stream 9 p.m. London, 5 p.m. New York time. And so if you enjoyed this video as well, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. And if you'd like to donate, there's some links below in the description. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.